Welcome to the Estill County Public Library. I'm glad to see this many out here. This is the biggest crowd we've had so far. So Skip must be famous.
Legend. In more ways than one.
We've been trying to collaborate on this for a while now, trying to get this started. And with COVID and everything, we're finally doing it. So, just a few things. Restroom is out to the left. Man and women. I have some drinks in the back. If you don't care to silence your phone or put it on vibrate or just in case. And we are doing Facebook Live and Zoom. So we do have a camera set up. So you will be in the camera. If that's okay. You look good.
It's a 360 camera. It automatically goes to whoever's talking. So it'll mostly go to him, but like if anybody calls or asks a question, it'll show the whole screen, like different segments. So it won't be like that the entire time.
So don't worry about the hair, y'all look fine. So I'm going to turn it over to Skip, and this is the first night of this, and we got 3 other nights.
Yes, ma'am.
Through the end of January. Same time, same place. Back out.
And we don't know what we're doing yet. We'll decide that toward the end of this program. But
Skip, go
Ms.
forward.
Lisa and Ms. Tiffany, thank you for inviting me to do this. What we're going to do here, and I'm not going to try not to rattle any cages or anything, but you're basically going to have a social studies lesson pre-care. And we're not going to have tests. So, and this is very informal. In 2008, Ms. Scotty Nolan and Penny West and I, they asked us to do an updated history of Estill County. So tonight, where I'm going to start, I'm going to follow our little platform. This was in the book, and I do remember the sesquicentennial, which was in 1958. So I wasn't here during 1808 though. But before we start, I want to mention a couple of things about what makes Estill County, not just Estill County, but this area, unique. And when I start these talks, and even, and some people don't want to believe this, and that's fine, but it was sometimes difficult. One of the hardest things to teach elementary kids was latitude and longitude. And to explain why that we find brachiopods on top of Barnes Mountain, Kitten Ridge, and out on Pilot, and so forth. And they would bring in a piece of something, and their eyes would be big, and they would say, "Mr. Johnson, I found a petrified wall snakes." Well, no, you didn't. It's a head of coral. And to try to explain to some of these youngsters, how the piece of coral got up on these mountains or down in the creek is very unique. But what I want us to take a look at here just very briefly, and I would tell them this, and it didn't really have much of an impact, but at one time, we were 10 degrees below the equator. Kentucky was, right here in Estill County. So just to take a little, and if you look at this, when you say it's 10 degrees below the equator, that doesn't mean a whole lot. But when you get a globe out and look at it, now Irving, where we're at right now, we're 38 degrees above. So if you go 10 degrees below, we're right north of Lima, Peru. We were a warm, shallow sea. And this is when we were Pangea. We were one continent. So, and that's going to come in later when we start to talk about agates and so forth. But and we're not going to get into agates tonight, but we're going to in one of these 4-part series. And the other thing I wanted to talk about, I have in my possession an old, Jack probably has this. It's the Geology of Estill County, Kentucky. Have you ever seen this? I will get you a copy of it by Willard Ross Gilson. I'm sure the name is familiar to you. And this was printed in 1966. And when I go talk to people about Estill County and they're geologists, they talk about the Great Meander. Does anyone here know what the Great Meander is? Well, I didn't either. But they're talking about what happened here in the Kentucky River. And it's an abandoned meander. Now, what does it mean to meander? To wander. And I see Mr. Tate here, who was assistant principal at the high school one time, and we sometimes refer to some of our students as water babies. Well, what does water do? It takes the path of least resistance. It meanders. And there would be a child that we were having trouble with getting to come to school, and we never knew where they were going to be. They would be at grandmother's, they'd be at mom and dad's. They took the path of least resistance. So they meandered. So this great Kentucky River meandered. Now Frankfort has two, but Estill County has the biggest one. And it's actually talked about here in this book, and it's referred to as the Pea Ridge Meander. And I have a topographical map here that I wanted to bring to show you that has part of it. Now, if you know where Station Camp Creek, it comes in the river up here. This river turns. Right here is, you see this white? That's low elevation. Part of it is over here. This is the Great Meander. It turned there at the fairgrounds, went up Wisemantown. This book says now Crooked Creek and Clear Creek drain this area. It actually went around. So when you're going down Wisemantown Road, when you're going down 499, and you're looking over to the left, if you're going out, where Jimmy Nolan's, all those bottoms down there, that's an ancient riverbed. And it actually turned there's probably some of you still know where Tom Boyd's junkyard was. Well, I have found some of the prettiest agates in Tom Boyd's junkyard. And I'll tell you this little story is a rock had laid in my backyard for 20 years. And I got to dig it in my closet, and I found a can that said Tom Boyd's junkyard on it. And it was an agate that I had found. And I had tried to get 3 different people to cut it, and they said that rock's not worth cutting. It isn't pretty enough to cut, it's going to come apart. Well, we have some young guys in our agate club now, and they looked at it, and one of them said, I'll cut it. So they put some epoxy mist in a vacuum and put that rock in there, and it held together. And I had 3 necklaces made out of it, and took and gave each one of Tom Boyd's $1 for letting me hunt out there. And I will bring them when we talk about agates. I will bring that. But it went out around Tom Boyd's, down by the soccer field, and turned. And when you're coming down Drowning Creek Hill, all of those bottoms over there, if someone comes into Estill County, to my family, and they don't know anything, they say, why aren't they buildings over there? Well, the reason they aren't buildings over there is because water gets up here. You know, and that is the old riverbed. So it went all the way around and literally turned like you're going to West Oregon School and went back in. It almost closed itself off. And if you climb Sweet Lick Knob, which was part of my social studies, Captain Hardy, he's a colonel now, let me take my classes up on top of Sweet Lick Knob. That's how I taught elevation. There's a benchmark on there. And when you look across at Pea Ridge, it looks like someone filled a big giant bowl full of dirt and turned it upside down. This is Pea Ridge right here. How Pea Ridge get its name? There's about 2 farms there that grew cowpeas, which is the forerunner to the soybean. So that's how Pea Ridge got its name. Now, first people of Estill County. We're moving back to the paleo times. And the way they define the paleo area is by a fluke. Not an arrowhead, it was a spear point. Now you're talking, there was an ice age here. The glaciers were down near at Cincinnati, the Ohio River. Our flora and fauna, the plants were much like Canada and northern Michigan. There were the firs, there was a beach. It was totally different. And when you try to tell people, some people, that there was actually a mammoth in Estill County, they don't want to believe you. Well, how do we know the paleo people were here in Estill County? Well, if you look in this magazine, The Central States, volume 87, January 2010, number 1, and you go over here, page 32, this whole edition is on the paleos. And it says above right, and I will pass this around here, and we're going to, when we finish, I'm going to leave this out. You can come up and we'll chat and do whatever. It says above right, a 3 11/16 inch closed point found by Kendall Arthur in a hog lot at Fitchburg, Estill County, Kentucky. It is made of a beautiful striped paleo Carter Cave flint. Carter Cave flint is found all over the United States. And we know that it comes up near Grayson. We also have a type of, we call it depolite locally. It's green. It has a brown skin. Now, I did not find this quote in situ. This came out of the creek that I was not diving in. And if you watch Oak Island, you're going to find out that Mother Nature cannot or does not very often make a 90-degree angle. You see this, and this is hard. You can give this to a flint napper today, and I know several flint nappers, and they take this and they whack and they beat and curse and skin knuckles. It's very, very hard to deal with. And you can saw it, you put it in your agate saw and saw it and make slabs out of it. It's easier to work. But I also see a whale in this, and there's a little brachiopod in there for its eye, and I will pass this around here in a few minutes. Now, I'm also, at this time, I've about finished this book called Sapiens. Now, growing up, watching on TV, see pictures of early man with the big brow, and we've been led that these were just savages. They were not very smart, and so forth. Well, this book, Sapiens, has really opened my eye, and I can't think of the author. Right now, I will bring the book next week. He says at this time, during the paleo time, and the archaic, which is the end of the paleo time, and the beginning of our climate change, that we were at our smartest, that we have been in decline ever since. Well, think about it. Why? Why did he say that? Because you had everyone. Some could do it better than others. I remember a story in my reading class that was The Boy Who Shaped Stone, which is one of my favorite stories. But you had to be able to take a piece of this flint and break it down and make you a tool. Everyone had to be able to do that. Everyone had to know which plants you could eat. You had to know the ones you could not eat. You had to know the ones. Everyone had to know everything. As we evolved, we specialized. And in this book, it talks specifically about, this guy says that we did not domesticate plants. Plants domesticated us, when you think about it. The Chinese were the first. There's 5 things on this earth that we domesticated that caused us not to have to be like the paleo people. The hunters and the gatherers, to be able to settle down and go into the agrarian society. Rice was the first one. The Chinese domesticated rice and the pig. That was the start. And you have wheat, corn, barley, and sorghum. Those 5 things we could sustain on if we had to. It's all we would need. Not even sugar. But you can take the sorghum, like molasses, or syrup, like the guy does up in Fitchburg. But in the paleo days, they started out and all they had basically were spear points. There was not a bow and arrow. And this is a replica of the, we'll pass these around, let you look at it. Mr. Tom Davis owns this point. I had the pleasure of getting to see this point last Thursday. So you can pass these around and look at it.
Sorry.
Yeah, could you mention what the flute is and what it's for?
Well, yes, sir. Thank you. The flute, and if you watch a modern day flint knapper outdo this, there aren't many of them. The flute is where, and this is called percussion flaking, where you probably, now this is a deer antler. They would have had a big elk antler. Now, before I do the flute, you have the mastodon or the mammoth. You had a giant sloth, and you had a giant buffalo. White-tailed deer was here, a horse, but it was a small horse that completely went extinct, and then the Spanish introduced it. You know, any at all? Sorry, very little, more than me then. But to be able to take this flute, and there are some points with this flute the whole length, and no one knows really how they did this. If you read some of James A. Michener's Centennial, they talk about Rattlesnake Butte in there, and that guy taking an antler and they try to describe how they do that. But that flute was taken out of there, so when you put this on your shaft, it fit tight. Now this is made out of bone. It's made out of the shin bone of a deer. You pass that around. But your paleo people primarily use the spear. So how did you kill a woolly mammoth with a spear? Well, again, they were intelligent people. And even a modern day elephant cannot step up or down over 24 inches. And they had to work in conjunction with each other to be able to drive. We know that they used fire. But chances are they had an area with a trench, a narrow trench that was at least 24 inches deep. If they drove that beast in that trench, you couldn't get out. You couldn't step out of that. And you couldn't get to them. Now, these were compassionate people. And the reason I say that is because we have found skeletons have been found of paleo people, and one guy was mauled, unbelievable. His left eye, his skull was crushed. He had a severely mangled left arm and a broken leg, and it had healed. So that means that there was enough food to go around, and someone cared enough about this person to where they took care of him and nursed him back to health, with these horrible injuries, and one of the reasons that they say that this, the author says that there wasn't a famine in the sense is because they traveled, they knew where the plums were, they knew where the berries were, and if one particular time of the year a plant didn't bear, they just ate more of the others. Now, how many in here have not gorged at some point in your life? Well, that's a natural. That is a natural instinct for human beings, because when you were in the hunter-gatherer days and you come to a plum tree or a berry tree, all you had with you is what you were carrying. You put all of it you could in your belly. Because you didn't know what was gonna be around the next bend. You know, these people lived a very idyllic life in a sense, and we think, woe is me, well, they didn't know, you know, they were just able to survive. But if you think about taking a woolly mammoth or a mastodon, that was your food, that was Maslow's hierarchy of needs. That was your food, clothing, and shelter. Just, you know, wrapped up. Now, later on, I guess they got tired of carrying these spears. Someone came up with the idea that we can downsize it, and you can't, if you're throwing something with a point this big, it's going to be heavy, and it's going to be cumbersome, and you're going to have to get close. Well, late paleo, early archaic, and some people want to argue about when these came about, the Atlanta was introduced. Now, there's a guy in Cincinnati, and I can't remember his name. I have it written down at home, but he has a little workshop he calls Archaic Arts. And I made him in Boonesboro. So the Atlanta came about. These were not called arrows. These were called darts. So someone realized if I could extend my arm out, and I had the pleasure of going to Mr. Tom Davis's last week, as I told you, some of them had beautiful butterfly shaped, some of them were conical, but called banner stones. I mean, these people were artists. They would put on here, some people they didn't work, it didn't give them anything. Well, they did it, whether it worked or not. So they would put a weight on this to give you some extra leverage, and this would be thrown. Now, one theory is, of course, you can't throw this in here, but you can imagine, I mean, Google Atlantis. They have Atlanta competitions. They have Atlantis now made out of aluminum. And people actually hunt rabbits with these things. It hit game on the run. So, one theory is, and again, we don't know this to be sure, and again, you weren't by yourself. You were in a pack, just like wolves. You were hunting, you were hungry. Well, they would put these darts on the end of this. And I'm going to pass these around here in a minute. Take a piece of cordage. This one is made out of flax. Here is a serrated. Again, I will pass these around here in a few minutes. Put cordage on this with a loop, and you had to go to the underbelly. Try to throw this in the underbelly. This is not pleasant to talk about. It sure wasn't pleasant for the mastodon. But the idea was to puncture the abdominal cavity, and with this string trailing, and remember, you got this thing in a trench, so he can't turn on you. The only place he's going to go, this would be trailing, and you want to get this up your point, especially the serrated ones, up in the influence. And then when he starts, this cord would be attached to the dart, and when he steps on this, he's going to pull his guts up. And you ain't going to go far with your guts on you. So the dinner bell was going right. But again, you know, we don't know for sure, but out west they have found evidence of these heads up in body cavities of the mammoths. I bought a deer antler. They used antlers. The Stone Age is what this was called in this book. It's the Stone Age. I mean, ceaseless toil, hunger, danger, constant warfare in early days. If you lived to be in your 40s, you were an old person in this day and age. I have a nice deer antler that a car hit the deer in front of me, knocked it off, and I went back to try to find the other one and couldn't. Here, down the road, I live on 499, right in Great Meander. When I look out I set out my house at night, the highest point in Estill County, Peter Mountain, is the top of the Kneeling Elephant. I think Gary Ballard owns it. It's the highest point in Estill County. People say, well, how did they know? They knew. They knew what elephants were. They knew what mammoths were. These stories have been passed down. Now, not only did they use the ladle, we'll pass this one too. Keep you busy. That's mature for an older, bigger person. I have one here that's called a youth. And I'll start this right over here with you. Pass around. And they have a smaller one that you use for fish. And this is just bean count. And Carl McIntosh, I've taken these to him and he's replicated these. I mean, and I don't know if you ever get the chance or not, but at the Forestry Service that we used to go to, the Living Archaeology weekend, there was a guy there had one of these, had an Atlanta, a replica that was made out of ivory that they had found. So we know they've been around that long. So here you had your it's hard for me to see that. And this is not fledged. So you had an Atlanta even for fishing. And I'll take this out and we'll pass that around. Any questions?
Is this a tooth or a bone?
That's an antler, deer antler.
We have one on Facebook. They wanted to know, they couldn't hear you. What was the highest point in Estill County?
It's over at, when you stand at the old Blue Banks Grocery and look out, Gary Ballard lives at their station camp. The church is right at the hind end of the hill.
Thank you.
And it is along the Great Meander. But the Peter Mountain is the highest. Several years ago, they were digging a basement right down from my house. And I stopped to see if they'd been finding anything. I knew the guy's truck that was there, and they all was kind of got like we are right now, that we were flying. I said, well, you find anything? You find any flint? And one of them scooted the ball across the top, looked up at the top where they were there. They said, what is that? I said, it's a deer toe. And they're like, yeah, we've been finding a whole lot of stuff. They didn't know what kind of bone it was. And some people don't. We went to an auction at Maysville one time and we kept going by and looking at this place, and there was a necklace there that was made out of human knuckles. Oh. Someone had messed up and that was fatal. It was. And when someone pointed it out, they left real quick. Does anyone have any questions or comments or?
What was the approximate range of the Atlanta? How far could that one
accurately? Only if you practice with that, and we're tall and we're long, you would be surprised at I'm talking 100 feet or more. You and I, someone tall like we are, and if you put a banner stone on that, I dare say you could throw that 200 feet or more. I mean, I've actually seen a competition where guys, they could roll a pie pan, they could get it, put in that label dart through a pie pan at the back of that wall. But it's just like shooting a free throw or anything else, you have to practice it. And it's very awkward when you start out. But some of the things, at this basement site that, when I pulled in, they were leaving out with the dump truck and I could see this up in the back of it. And I stopped the guy and I said, "Where are you going?" He said, "We got a load of backfill here. We'll get ready to take it." I said, "If you don't care, get out and roll that stone out the back of that truck for me." I can tell, I just knew by the triangular shape of it. We refer to these sometimes what as lap stones. You could literally, you could cross your legs, and when you come up here, you'll see this side is either being in or very near a fire. But this is a nutting stone. And I asked that guy, I said, "Where did that come out of? Where did you find this?" And he said, "Right in that bank right there." I carried a deer antler with me, so I got over and started digging with a deer antler, and this rolled out. It's a ball of hematite. And it started to flake, so I went home and mixed up some Elmer's glue with water and painted it with it so it doesn't flake. But, it fits. And then I got to dig, and I dug some more. And lo and behold, this little nugget. And again, and you can train your eye to do this when you're hunting agates, is when you see something in a creek that's flat like that, chances are Mother Nature didn't do that. And you're going to have some people, and it can, I'm not going to say it can, but it's highly unlikely because, again, there's your 90. Someone squared that off, and you can tell by the way that it's a grinding in stone. There you go, young man, you can hold that. And as I said, this point here with the shin bone, for some reason the shin bone make good points and knife handles. Case actually uses the shin bone of a cow out of South America for their knife blade. Well, I kept digging. And then this popped out. And you can see, and it fascinates me just to know that maybe a paleo person held this at one time. And I don't know, am I crazy?
No.
I'm not, but it gives me a special feeling inside for me to be able to do this. But you can see the marks on it where it's been used. And then I dug a little farther.
So would you say that they're kind of being used like a mortar and pestle?
Well, that was their kitchen counter.
Because the large rock that you passed around, there's a specific way I was holding it and it fit
It
perfectly.
fits right in your hand. And all of these will. I'm gonna have Larry Miller search y'all now before we leave. And again, this is an ugly. This came out of the creek right below the hog block that Kendall Arthur found the clovers poured in. And I stopped and see Kendall. He still lived at Fitchburg. He took me up there the other day. Said, "Right here's where I found it." He was 12 years old. He said, "I picked it up," and he said, "Start to throw it." We picked them up all the time. He said, "I started to sail it toward the creek, and I felt it. It felt different. We got to looking at it, and then he said someone came by the house and offered $75 for it, and we knew that it was something special." And he never did tell me how much that he wound up getting for it. But the standard rule today is $1,000 an inch. So that paleo, you would say that's pretty much right, John. It's John Knowles and Scott Bledsoe. I would say that's not far fetched. So you're talking about 3 11/16. You're talking $3,500 for that one point, which is why I don't own it. It has a good home. I don't think it will ever be safe. But if you just look at this, it looks just like just a piece of brown rock laying in the creek. But again, I saw that 90. And if you look at this, And when I'm gonna pass this one around too, you had to have something heavy. Because it didn't take these paleo people long to figure out. Cause I can go pick berries all day. Or I can scrounge around in that creek, crawdads and mussel shells or whatever. I can kill that outfit right there and throw his bone on the fire and crack it and take that mar out of there. And that's about 4 days worth of scratching in the ground for hickory nuts. So they knew, I mean, they were, but, and this would be a hard piece of work, but if you look, it has actually been played. And before I played all this, I've let several people look at this and they agreed with it. But when you put your hand on this, 4 hands, now these people were not big. They were closer to what our Inuits are because they lived in a cold climate. They were shorter and, you know, just not big and tall like we are. They didn't have the food sources to go. But I believe in my heart and soul that this is a tool. And feel free to disagree. And I did not realize until studying the paleo, they would even work, this is a flake. And when I pass this around, it's serrated. If you run, you could skin something with this today. Or you could cut your steak at dinner with this. In this day and age. And I found this, it came out of Fitchburg Creek. Here's a little, I think this one passed on in again. People talk about my mental state sometimes. Yeah, you look at this real close, I think it resembles a whale. When I pass this around and you look at it, and you look at its eye, or do you know what a brachiopod is? Like an oyster is a brachiopod. I'll give you the definition. A brachiopod, any of various marine invertebrates of the phylum Brachiopodia, having bivalve dorsal and ventral shells enclosing a pair of tentacles, arm-like structures that are used to sweep minute food particles into the mouth. The state fossil of Kentucky. An oyster is a brachiopod. And you find these shells, but if you look real close, that eye, you will see a little brachiopod. It is. And here is another piece that has a big old fluke knocked out of it, and it too came where I found both of these pieces, all 3 of them, the big piece and that piece and this piece on the same rock bar within an area, which makes me think that I'm close. And again, I talk about one of these creeks. I always ask permission before I go with Mr. Beckley up at Fitchburg. If you'll stop and ask him, he's never, that I know, has ever told anyone no. But I go up, I help take care of the Fitchburg furnace, and I sometimes, if I have an hour or so, and I hit the creek and hunt. But this was probably a scraper. And like Christina said, if you move these things around, you find a way that they fit in your hand. There's you another one. God, is it okay to pass these? Scott Bledsoe, one of my former students. Scott, everybody. It's like being married. Sometimes we got a voluptuous relationship, but it's worked out. I'm proud of Scott. My relationship with him, I met him in the school system, and we kind of barked at each other every now and then. We were never disrespectful, but he went on and become a veteran, and I'm proud of being part of his life. And I knew that he was into this and I called him. And these are paleo era points that he's brought. He's gonna be here next week dressed in, pioneer attire. So we're gonna move out of the paleo and into the archaic period next week, to where the Europeans get here. So he's gonna be a lone hunter, here next week. Now this centerpiece, is that a gorget? Has a hole drilled in it. How did they drill holes? How do you think they would drill a hole? Flint bit, no, bow drill. A bow drill. There's one at Glady Creek. That bow drill, sand and cane. Some of them would do it by hand or with the bow. So, but what does this tell you? If they had that gorget was fashion, it wasn't a necessity. And when you see things, that was a piece of their jewelry, maybe ceremonial, which means that these people had time to be in the arts, and they had some leisure time. You know, it wasn't all ceaseless toil. For the most part, it was, but in different segments of them. And a minute ago, we mentioned constant war. Now, they fought over hunting grounds, just like Kentucky. What do we call Kentucky? The dark and bloody drain. And there's a reason for that. And no one really knows where that came from. We've had different people, and we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit, but when you think about it, the Cherokee sold Kentucky because they were mad at the Shawnee. The Shawnee had run them off. So at Sycamore Shoals, you had some rich white guys that hired Daniel Boone, but we think this is where the saying dark and bloody ground came from. There was a chief named Dragon Canoe who was bitterly opposed. If you ask a Native American, do you want to sell this land? They would say, I don't own this land, which is what we wanted to hear. If you don't own it, who does? Well, they looked at it, no one. The earth is my mother. They would even, at times, would have a ceremony before they would dig a hole in the ground, because the earth was their mother. Now, they were rough on the land. They used fire, just like we do. But they were different in a way. So we're going to move from out of the dark age. Next week, we will go to the archaic. The bow and arrow comes in. They do away. Someone was smart enough to figure out, this is, to do a bow. And to get down to John was talking about, when I would go hunt, I live over on Wiseman Town, and if you go down Station Camp, which we're going to talk exclusively about next week, which was named by Daniel Boone, there's an area up there that's not much bigger than the hood of the car. But I would take 2 buckets. I'd take, actually 4 or 5 buckets. I'd line them, I'd put a bucket down here, and I'd go off a couple hundred feet, and I'd put another bucket, and I'd take me a nail laser, because I was going back to the same places year after year. I did it till they started no-till farming. I was talking to John, we've got a guy that's maybe going to plow some this year, but I would take that nail apron and I would go through there, and every piece of flint I came to, I picked up, because I knew I was going to come back and hunt that place again. I just didn't want to throw them down. Then I'd go home and I'd take that bucket, put me a tarp out, fill that bucket full of water, and start going through it. And I have found points like you were talking about, they're the size of your little fingernail. And had I not done that, I wouldn't have found those. But those are your true, what we call bird points, or that'd be the point they shot you with. They couldn't be big. due to the air and so forth. Here, with an ladder, a little bit of weight helps. Now, we actually made some shafts at one time, and I've had several students in my life. You know, you can't teach someone something that knows more than you do. And they did not want to believe that you got to put the pig in first. When you're making this shaft, it won't fly. If you put the little in, it'll turn around. If you get in the canoe, of course I'm using the big guy and I'm in the back. If you don't paddle, that canoe, if you just sit there, the heaviest person sitting in the back and you're in a current, that canoe's going to slowly turn around and that heavy person's going to be, that's just the way it is. It's aerodynamics, the fluid of the situation. It took me a while to make them after they made the first shaft and tried to throw it, it wouldn't go because it was trying to turn over in air and make the big end go first. And they realized, and if we sat down to do one of these for the first time, your first thought was, I want the little end, I want it to look like an airplane, you know. But it's, you know, with the little end first on one of these, it isn't aerodynamic. Now here is another piece that I have been, well, I actually had a guy look at it. I wouldn't pay $25 to give me a piece of paper to read. But this is a very special piece. This is a paleo knife. This probably had a haft on it at one time. And I'm going to pass this around. It's a very, very unique piece. This came out of Clark County near the Red River. Any questions? I'm going to start your other face around, and I'm going to pass your deer skin around too. And again, that is a deer skin?
Yeah, it's just a piece of buckskin. It's
Okay. Now, something about this is a piece of buckskin. We're going to get our head of ourselves a little bit. Why is a buck called a buck? Why is a dollar called a buck? Because your average deer was worth $1. What's that? They were worth 40 cents a pound. And the average height, when the hair was taken off of it, and it was straight, like 2.5 times. It's your dollar. But this has been tanned, it's soft, it's supple. Now, I can't imagine having the skin of an elephant, but, you know, but it's just like we make the joke sometimes, how do you use an elephant? One bite at a time. That's what they did. But they were, and the reason we know this is, it's maybe in Wisconsin, there's a museum out there that they found a butcher site. They just about literally built the museum around that, where the skeletons are still there and the cut marks are in it. But you think of this, I mean, no metal, no plastic, no bucket. You know, everything had to be made out of wood, bone, or stone.
Were these found in Estill?
Where were these found, Scott? These are from this.
They were found in the region, you're talking Clark County, Powell County, Redford, mostly. Part of it's imported stone, clearly, but they were all found here.
But these people were just like us today. If they were here today, they would fit right in with us. They may look different, but we have the same genetic, the DNA. You know, they would be one of us. You know, they weren't that different. Just a different time frame.
What's that time frame, Skip? When are we talking about?
How was that?
For the paleos, and I mentioned, I should have got this little book out. And I've taken a lot of this information. I was again, I don't mean to slam, but I was an ant, archaeology and anthropology in teaching, and this is I have one of these for every one of my students. It's Prehistoric Hunters and Gatherers, Kentucky's first pioneer, and it has a little timeline in it. Your early paleo would be, and again, this can change, 11,500 years ago to 10,800 years ago. Middle paleo, 10,800 to 10,500, and then your late paleo would be up to 10,000 years ago. But they found a Clovis point down in Chile. And the reason they're called Clovis points is the first one was found in Clovis, New Mexico. And it was dated, the radiocarbon materials around it was dated to be 6,000 years old. And then later on, they found one farther south that dated 12,000 years old. So I don't think we really know. I think, it's just a long time ago. My personal opinion, I think these people were here longer than we think, and I think they were here before we give them credit. And in all of my education and so forth, they talk about the first people came across the Bering Sea, the Bering Strait, because during the Ice Age, they said that the oceans dropped 300 feet. Well, you think about, but why was they found a Clovis point at that area? The only place that they found Clovis points are like in New Mexico and in Kentucky. And this is a big debate among your archaeologists. If these people came in here that early and were using these Clovis points, then why haven't we found one somewhere else? And no one can answer that. Maybe we had some expert workmanship here. I don't know, but why hasn't one been found? We've been taught the Leakeys, Old Bay Gorge, where the people came out of, your early National Geographics. But the only place these Clovis points have been found are in here in North America, which is, open for debate. The early archaic people started coming in about 8,000 years ago. And those, your archaic people, your paleo people have evolved through time down to be what we know as our modern Native Americans. And if you read, your Shawnee, your Cherokee, the Iroquois, the Chickasaws, they all had different dialects and so forth. It's just very interesting, and it's, we can debate, a lot. Well, it's almost, it's about 6 or 7 minutes till. Does anyone have a question or a comment or? Yes.
I read about the first people being called Fort Ancient, but I couldn't find any more information. Do you have?
Well, your Fort Ancient people, your Fort Ancients come on up in the Archaic, up in the later Archaic, and they're more refined. They have pottery. Did you Google that? And have you Googled Fort Ancient?
No, institutions such as universities are having to give recognition
Yes.
to indigenous people, and so EKU refers to Fort Ancient.
They found a Fort Ancient camp when they put our new sewer plant. You have to go in, do a dig after there are any graves there, and I agree with that. I've been falsely accused of being a digger and a looter, which I'm not. I don't want somebody else over there being my dad. And I'm not going to go be someone else's dad. Andy, what do you say about the Fort Ancient? Or you think it was in the art? I mean,
I think there was the last Indian here.
that they were.
Yeah, we found lots on Kentucky River.
Really, I mean, I know for that. You know, John Marcus, you need to meet him before you leave. But the Fort Ancient, like Anthony says, it's the late archaic, but they were your quote modern. They had metal. The Europeans had got here to them. They had metal knives. A lot of times they used flint too, but they would be more of our modern. The bow, they used the bow and arrow. They had pottery. They stayed in one place long. The three sisters, corn, beans, and squash, they fought. So they were not complete nomads. You know, they didn't jump up. They would stay, probably left the river bottoms of a very cold, bitter, and went to the rock shelters up in the mountains. But basically, they would be what we consider modern in a sense. Anyone else have a question? Yes, sir.
Comments, yeah,
Yes.
you talked about, I used to teach, earth science.
Yes.
I teach rocks and everything. We do a rock pledge with my students. And what you said is right. I don't know how many times that students bring in rocks. I remember an Ashcraft girl one time. She lived on top of Tiffany Ridge.
Yes.
And she brought in a breaking pot. Like you said, she found it there. She said, well, what is it, Mr. Tate? How did they get up here? Same way. Had to explain.
It was a sea creature.
Yeah.
They wanted to know, no, there's no way.
Yeah, I know.
Way.
She found it right on top of Tiffany Ridge.
You know, and as I said, I live on 499 at a place, the grocery store where the Gene Arvin run was called Blue Banks.
Right.
Well, the reason it's called Blue Banks is I live in it's clay. And it's blue from a mineral called glauconite. That was an ancient sea baby.
Yeah.
That's where your agates are.
Really interesting.
And a lot of your agates were sea creatures. They were ragged ponds or heads of coral. Who else had a question? Anyone else?
We have one on the computer, but I was going to tell you to try to stay a little bit closer so everybody can hear you. Okay. I know you like to move around,
I
but
like to run.
I think we'll try to get a wireless mic next time. They asked, what was the distance the group could move if needed to relocate?
Oh, and miles. They knew every stream. They knew where every bush was, but you had to be careful not to move into someone else's territory. You know, they knew, like, Baton Rouge, Louisiana. How did it get its name?
Red stick.
Red stick. Someone found a red baton stuck in the ground that was a marker. Paint Lick, Kentucky. Same thing. And paint on the stick stuck down by the leg to say, this is my leg. Don't you come around here. We may eat you for supper. A little more. You know, you don't know. But, you know, we're not going to get into that gruesome category tonight, but it did happen. They had markers that they knew, but they would range, you know, they were asking Daniel Boone, well, I was somewhere there with Doug, and they was talking about, some guy said, well, why do they call this place Plum Lake? Said there ain't a plum tree around here, or they're in the lake here. He said, that's where we stop and eat the plums. We gather in our hat from Plum Lake. From the lake up the street. Sweet Lake Knob down here. Estill Springs, that was your first fast food. If you wanted something to eat, then there was a trail wider than this room to it. It was there was almost 2 acres that was watered down. That water has iron. It's collegiate water, iron, sulfur, and salt. Stamping ground. How stamping ground get its name? The buffalo, there was a salt spring there, and the buffalo went and stood in line and stomped the ground. Probably put one out of the way a time. You know, and to me, this is social studies, and that, you know, and I enjoy teaching this. And if you'll start peeling back the layers, you know, one of the first things I would try to tell my students is you can't help where you live, what's your last name, you know, and then, you know, anyone in here know where Fighting Branch was? Huh? Yeah, your grandpa lived on the back side or the front side, depending on which way you went. You know, my aunt lived right in the middle of it. It's called Fighting Branch for a reason. You know, but Pea Ridge, they didn't, some of them didn't want to say they lived on Pea Ridge because they were going to be made fun of. But when they found out that it came from a cow pea, not somebody peeing over the ridge, it changed around a little bit. Where they live. You know, Crooked Creek. It's Crooked Creek, Clear Creek. Dickey Fork. You know, someone went in there and come out covered in ticks at one time. You know, Big Doe Creek and Little Doe Creek. You know, these names have a meaning. But I'm gonna leave this stuff out. It's 7 o'clock. I'm a former recruiting officer, and I believe it's starting and ending on time. But thank you for coming tonight. I've enjoyed this. I said, you got blitz on time. We'll be here next week, same time, same station. I hope.